everybody, it's Tara. Today I am going a little bit crazy and a little bit overboard, and I am unhauling over 50 books. In the past, I have done purges of my bookshelves at least once a year because I like to keep my collection small. I like to get rid of the books that I didn't like or I don't think I'll ever read again, because why bother keeping them? But Cindy from Read with Cindy recently did a video on why she only owns 4 books and the subject of consumerism on booktube. I highly recommend you go give that a watch. I will link it down below and up there for you guys. And that video really got me thinking. It really got me looking more critically at my own bookshelves and all the books I own and wondering, did I really need all those books? Of course the answer is no, I don't need any of these books, but then I would have no books and I don't want that situation. So then the question became, which of these books do I really want? Which of these books makes sense to keep on my bookshelves? And I went through every single book that I own and I was super brutal about this and super honest with myself of whether or not I thought I was ever going to read that book again, or whether or not there was another reason why I was keeping it. Some books I'm always going to have. I'm always going to have Harry Potter because I'm always going to be rereading that. I'm always going to have A Song of Ice and Fire and The Lunar Chronicles and my other favorite books because I know I will read those again someday. But there are other books that I kept maybe thinking I would read them again someday, maybe. And there are books that I kept that I knew I wasn't going to read, but I just wanted the whole collection of that author's books, and books that I kept for I don't even know what reason, to be honest. So after this purge, I have over 50 books to unhaul. They will all be donated to my local library because I love my library and I love supporting my library. Because there are so many books, I am not going to go through every single one and give you a synopsis because, let's be honest, this video would be like 4 hours long. So I'm just going to show you the books and maybe say a little bit about why I'm getting rid of them or why I had them in the first place. And at the very end of the video, I will be doing a try a chapter challenge with 5 books that have been on my TBR shelf for many, many years. It's time to get rid of them. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm gonna go alphabetically by the author's last name because that's generally how I organize my books, so that's what we're doing. Starting with Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. Don't hate me. The Lost Symbol and Origin by Dan Brown. If you saw my June and July wrap-up, this will not be a surprise to you. Chicken Soup for the Cat Lover Soul, edited by Jack Canfield and a bunch of other people. The Lost World by Michael Crichton. I am keeping Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton because I do want to read that again someday. Jurassic Park is my favorite movie of all time, and I remember liking the book, but I didn't like this one so much, so off it goes. Room by Emma Donoghue. Bridget Jones' Mad About the Boy by Helen Fielding. Dark Places by Gillian Flynn. Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert. Looking for Alaska, An Abundance of Katherines, and Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. And Will Grayson by John Green and David Levithan. 1,000 Pieces of You by Claudia Gray. Water for Elephants by Sara Gruen. Under the Dome by Stephen King. I did really enjoy this book and I would like to read it again someday, except it is absolutely massive and I just do not have time for that. An Unwanted Guest by Sherry Lapina. I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell by Tucker Max. The Bookshop of Yesterdays by Amy Meyerson. How to Tell If Your Cat is Plotting to Kill You by The Oatmeal. I might actually give this a quick reread before I donate it because it's like a series of comics. It'll be super quick and it is really funny. And now a bunch of books by 2 authors who I do love, and I've been keeping these books for a long time because I love the authors and I just wanted a complete collection. But again, I was being very honest with myself and very critical, and am I ever going to read these particular books by these authors again? No. So I'm taking them off my shelf. First, by Chuck Palahniuk, Make Something Up, Stories You Can't Unread. Stranger Than Fiction, Survivor, Diary, Lullaby, Beautiful You, Tell All, and very possibly the strangest book I have ever read in my life, Pygmy. And now Jodi Picoult. She is one of my favorite authors, and it kind of hurts that I'm getting rid of all of these books, but it's gotta be done. Between the Lines, Songs of the Humpback Whale, Harvesting the Heart, Picture Perfect, Vanishing Acts, 19 Minutes, Handle with Care, Sing You Home, Small Great Things, and by far my least favorite book of Jodi Picoult's, The 10th Circle. And moving on to another favorite author, Anne Rice. I absolutely love and will always keep her Lives of the Mayfair Witches series and her Vampire Chronicles series, but when I got into those books, I went on this quest to own all of her books and read all of her books. And these standalones I've had on my shelf for probably 13, 14, 15 years. I haven't read them yet. Am I ever gonna read them? Probably not. Pandora, Vittorio the Vampire, Violin, Servant of the Bones, Cry to Heaven, The Feast of All Saints, and The Wolf Gift, which I maybe might have read eventually, but after reading Prince Lestat a couple months ago, I'm kind of just disenchanted with Anne Rice at this point, so goodbye. The Casual Vacancy by J.K. Rowling. This one actually does hurt a little bit because it's J.K. Rowling. But I didn't love this book. Am I gonna read it again? No. So, do I need to keep it? No. This Savage Song and The Archived by Victoria Schwab, and Afterworlds by Scott Westerfeld. And now on to the Try a Chapter Challenge portion of this video. I will be telling you about these next 5 books because I did read a chapter of them, so it makes sense to tell you a little bit about the book before I tell you about the chapter. First up, On a Winter's Night, A Traveler by Italo Calvino. This was recommended to me by a friend about 8 years ago, and it sounded really interesting, and he loved it, so I thought I'd give it a go. What he told me about this book is that it is a series of short stories that cut off abruptly right in the middle of the story, and then in between them are interludes of the reader going to various bookstores trying to find a complete copy of this actual book so they could finish all the stories. But from what Goodreads says, the interludes of the reader going on this quest is actually the main plot. Each chapter is made up of 2 parts. First, the narrator talking directly to the reader about this quest that they're going on, and then the short stories themselves. The first chapter sets up a scenario in which the reader is going to a bookstore to buy Italo Calvino's new novel, and it amused me right off the bat because of the spot-on depiction of the struggle that every reader goes through when they go to a bookstore looking for one book, and that is to resist all the other temptations that meet them there. Temptations like books you've wanted to read for ages, books you want to own so they'll be handy just in case, books you need to go with other books on your shelves, and books that fill you with sudden inexplicable curiosity that is not easily justified. But other than that, the chapter dragged on and on and on. It was so wordy and it kept going off on different tangents that I really didn't care about, and a few parts reminded me of that scene from The Matrix Reloaded where Neo is talking to the architect and the architect is saying all of this stuff where you recognize the words, but the way they're put together just doesn't make any sense. I'd like to read you an example of this so you can really wrap your head around how much nonsense it was. Of course, the circling of the book too, this reading around it before reading inside it, is part of the pleasure in a new book, but like all preliminary pleasures, it has its optimal duration if you want it to serve as a thrust toward the more substantial pleasure of the consummation of the act, namely the reading of the book. What? I was not impressed by that first part of the chapter, so when I got into the short story itself, I was excited to finally get to a story. But it was even more convoluted, if you can believe that. Here's another quote. I would like to erase the consequences of certain events and restore an initial condition, but every moment of my life brings with it an accumulation of new facts, and each of these new facts brings with it consequences. So the more I seek to return to the zero moment from which I set out, the further I move away from it. Though all my actions are bent on erasing the consequences of previous actions, and though I manage to achieve applicable results in this erasure, enough to open my heart to hopes of immediate relief, I must however bear in mind that my every move to erase previous events provokes a rain of new events, which complicate the situation worse than before, and which I will then, in their turn, have to try to erase. What? The entire thing reads like that, just words upon words upon words that do not need to be there. 6 pages into that short story section, all that's been established is that the main character is at a train station, and they missed the person they were supposed to meet there, so now they don't know what to do. 6 pages for that. I gave up at that point. There were still 10 pages left in that section, and I just couldn't do it. Could not do it. I cannot believe that this book has been on my bookshelf for like 8 years, and if I had only read the first few pages, I would have DNF'd this so long ago. Goodbye. Next up is The Red Garden by Alice Hoffman. This is set in small town Massachusetts and spans 300 years of stories about characters whose lives are all intertwined by fate. Seems a little vague, but that's what it says. I picked up this book because Alice Hoffman is the favorite author of one of my favorite authors, Jodi Picoult, and I wanted to read what she likes to read. And then I never did. It kicks off in the year 1750 in this little patch of Massachusetts where nothing actually exists yet, and it follows the history of the town's founder, Hallie Brady, and how she and the people that she's with settle and create the town. It goes through the settlers arriving at this point in Massachusetts and getting snowed in, and they are going to starve to death through the winter, but Hallie saves them all, and she bonds with these bears that she finds in the woods, and it's kind of a weird bond, to be honest. She drinks the milk of the mother bear and cuddles with the baby bear, and yeah, it was weird. The death of that baby bear is what eventually drives Hallie into the woods for good. She is presumably never seen or heard from again. After that chapter, I looked ahead to see if the next one would follow Hallie's daughter and her life, but it seems to skip decades in between chapters, and it does seem to follow the families that are living in that town. I'm kind of intrigued. I wasn't in love with the first chapter, but I was definitely intrigued. I enjoyed it. And I usually really like books that takes a whole bunch of different characters or a whole bunch of different storylines and connects them somehow. So, I don't know. Maybe. Moving on to Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies by Jane Austen and Seth Grahame-Smith, which is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice with zombies. This is one of those icky, really stiff paperbacks. It's already got a point against it. Chapter 1 is extremely short. It's just that, and then that, and that. That's it. It's like a page and a half. That's it. All that is going on in this chapter is that Mrs. Bennet is super excited because some rich guy just moved to town and she thinks that maybe he'll marry one of her many daughters. And Mr. Bennet derides her for being concerned with such petty matters while there is, hello, a zombie invasion to worry about. I was really hoping for a modern take on Pride and Prejudice, but the language that it's written in is still that really old-fashioned, clunky, hard-to-follow language that I assume the original Pride and Prejudice is also written in. Which is to say, not my thing. So this is probably going to be a no. Next up is One Foot Wrong by Sophie Laguna. This follows a young girl named Hester whose abusive parents don't let her leave the house ever. Her days indoors are filled with chores, religious observations, and punishments, and talking to her friends, Spoon, Door, Broom, and others, until one day Handel convinces her to go outside. This sounds a lot like Room by Emma Donoghue, which I also recently read, but the fact that it was her parents keeping her captive and the whole religious fanaticism thing and the punishments gave me real Flowers in the Attic vibes, so I was definitely interested. But it starts out exactly like Room, except not good. This could be Room's really crappy first draft. And it also read like it was on fast forward. Just a few pages of very shallow minor establishment and then bam, she's going outside for the first time in her entire life. And because it came so quick and it went so quick, it just did not have the weight that something so monumental should have had. Room had me gripped from the first few pages, but this book did not. I had zero connection to the narrator, zero interest in what was going on, and really zero interest in reading any further. Maybe if I hadn't read Room, this would have been more interesting to me, but I have read Room. And this feels like a bad knockoff. Obviously a no. And last but not least is The Reapers Are the Angels by Alden Bell. This is a post-apocalyptic zombie novel that follows a 15-year-old girl who has never known a world without zombies. She's looking for somewhere to call home and for her own redemption for something mysterious that she's done in the past, while she's on the run from not only all the zombies who want to eat her, but a man who wants to murder her. The chapter follows the protagonist who has been living on this island for a few months, safely away from the infected mainland, but the tide has been going out, the distance between the island and the mainland is shrinking, and then one morning the broken body of a zombie washes up on shore, and she knows that it's time to move on yet again. That zombie was in really bad shape. His back was broken, his jaw was completely torn off, he was missing an eye, his whole face was just wrecked. It was immediate gore and immediate horror. That gore and horror probably would have totally won me over if it wasn't for something else that totally turned me off, and that is the complete lack of quotation marks in this entire book. There's plenty of dialogue, but for some reason there's no quotation marks, and I just can't deal with that. I just can't do it. I'm sorry. Can't do it. There was really only one book that I was at all interested in out of those 5, and that was The Red Garden by Alice Hoffman. Again, I didn't fall in love with it immediately, but I did like what I read. It is the only one that I liked at all, so will I ever read this book? Maybe. Maybe it'll just end up on an Unhaul again in the future, but for now it's staying. So that is it for my huge, massive, crazy Unhaul and my try a chapter challenge. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more. Let me know down below what books you guys have recently unhauled, or if you don't unhaul, why not? And until next time, everybody, happy reading and happy unhauling. Bye-bye.